Everyone, what's going on? Welcome back to another edition. I'm Mike, and if you're brand new to this channel, please feel free to hit that subscribe button so I can see you again next time. But if you're coming back to another video and you're not subscribed as of yet, please feel free to also hit that red subscribe button. It takes you literally about a second or two. So today I'm talking about the newly, highly anticipated MCU latest Marvel movie that is the first movie officially to come out into the phase 4 of the MCU, and it's Black Widow. So Black Widow was scheduled to come out in 2020, but due to COVID, that didn't happen, and after numerous rescheduling issues, we finally get the movie into the cinema. Going into this movie, I wasn't really overhyped about it because Black Widow has never been one of my favourite characters, although I do really respect what she has brought to the MCU. And in general, as a whole, I really like Scarlett Johansson in this role because I think she was really made for this role, and the casting choice here was just utterly fantastic. And a lot of fans have really wanted a Black Widow movie. And in around 2004, they actually talked about making a Black Widow movie, but for some reason, just never came to fruition. And it's only until 2020, well, technically 2021, that we actually finally get a movie, and essentially set between Civil War and Infinity War. So it kind of closes a gap and gives us a bit more story, and a bit why Scarlett Johansson did change her hair to that famous blonde lock. In this movie, Natasha Romanoff has to face the dark secrets, and her past really comes together in this plot where ultimately a villain called Dreykov has got this kind of serum where he wants to control all the Black Widows around the entire world and have this big power to himself in this organization called the Red Room. But essentially, it does star Scarlett Johansson. Florence Pugh comes to play as Yolanda. We get Rachel Weisz, David Harbour, Ray Winstone. William Hurt also returns to the franchise. So what I can ultimately say in terms of my positives for the movie, firstly, the action sequences in this are utterly fantastic. I really believe that there's some of the best work the MCU have done to date. I really just like the cinematography that was present at the time. I also really like the fact of the stunt work and the choreography that was put into this, because especially with Black Widow, as we get every scene with her in an MCU movie, there's always that part of the choreography because she is such a stealthy spy and this kind of like assassination type character. And I really felt like this came into play in this movie specifically, as obviously it is about her, but they really need to kind of capitalize on that because this is the character's main strength points, and you really need to kind of capitulate that onto the screen. Otherwise, it's just not going to work, and her believability, the character that they've built up over all these years, is just going to kind of go to pot. Also, the movie is directed by Cate Shortland. Now, she hasn't actually directed an MCU movie before, but I know before this movie, she did one called Berlin Syndrome, which is kind of a psychological thriller, and certainly some aspects into this, especially the opening scene and kind of like the opening titles that we get on screen, certainly leads into that kind of thriller, darker-esque vibes, which I really appreciated at times. I was like, am I watching even a Black Widow movie? It kind of felt like a Bourne Ultimatum kind of opening title sequence, like a Sicario vibe. I was down for the ride. I actually really enjoyed that, and I like that they brought a darker tone to this movie overall because I felt like it was really fitting, and especially with the evolution of the MCU, I really feel like, you know, the comedy works great. That's definitely one thing that they excel in. But ultimately, I've always been a fan of darker tone movies, but I actually really appreciate that they incorporated elements of the darker tones in this movie overall. So the additions of Florence Pugh, David Harbour and Rachel Weisz were fantastic. Great casting choices, and Florence Pugh is meant to play kind of like Natasha Romanoff's sister in this. And I actually really respected the casting because at least Florence Pugh looks like Scarlett Johansson, especially in this movie. And they really did that well. Now, that could just come down to the kind of the makeup for these two actresses. But if there was that kind of element to it, definitely a round of applause for that because they actually was very convincing. And also Rachel Weisz kind of has a similar look to them. So overall, that kind of casting choice really worked well, especially with this kind of fitting backstory that we get with Black Widow. Another kind of big praise that I've got to give this movie, and kind of my favourite aspect of this movie as a whole, is Taskmaster. Now, I don't know a lot about this villain because I've never read any of the MCU comics. All the backstory that I've got is just watching the previous MCU titles. But the Taskmaster, whatever scenes that this villain is in, blows it away. Absolutely, definitely a big portion to the action set pieces that we get in this movie, because ultimately the Taskmaster, I think, really helps carry along those action set pieces, just because the character is just really menacing. When you see this character, you really think, wow, this person really poses a threat. And one of the biggest highlights also I've got to mention, Florence Pugh herself as Yolanda. I really felt like she knocked this out of the park. She actually provides a lot of the comedy in this movie, and a lot of that comedy does work thanks to her, and she really is a fantastic addition to the MCU. Now, in terms of my negatives, to try avoid again any spoilers, the main villain, Dreykov, played by Ray Winstone, I think they're trying to put on like a Slovenian or some kind of accent. Ultimately, Ray Winstone as this English actor trying to put that accent on, yeah, it kind of just doesn't work. And his kind of overall arc or how they written him in this story, it's quite poor. He's not really on screen that much, mainly in kind of the third act. And we see like little snippets throughout, kind of just be like, right, yeah, this is where the villain, and this is who it is, and this is where they're at. I didn't care about him. I didn't think that he was great. I didn't think that he really added anything to this movie at all. And I kind of wish that they focused on the Taskmaster more and made them as the main villain. And I definitely think they would have elevated this movie. At odd times, the comedy doesn't work either. We do get a lot of those forced comedy moments, which is just a shame because I really don't feel like the need to. And also I felt like the runtime at odd little times ran a bit too much, because the second act of this movie, so the first act really builds it up pretty well, and the third act is kind of like a satisfying closing act, but that middle part does drag a little bit, or the pacing as such slows down, unfortunately. So overall, what I'm going to say is that I think this is a good addition to the MCU. Now, do I think it's the best kind of female-orientated superhero movie? No. For me, personally, I think it's Wonder Woman. So my overall score for Black Widow is... And one other thing I've just got to add is the end credits scene in this movie has got me hyped for the future of the MCU, because it certainly leads in to everything that's been going on as of the start of this year. And I absolutely can't wait to see what other people's reactions are, because the people that were sat behind me at tonight's showing, they were like, oh. Anyway, I hope you really enjoyed this review. Please give the video a big thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel if you already haven't. This has been a Z Review, and I'll be seeing you later.